Chapter 4. Finally reaching the end of the covered walkway that snaked along for what felt like an eternity, Rika was met by a blast of wintry night wind that seemed to strip off not just her clothes, but the flesh of her body as well, mercilessly lashing the bare bones beneath. Once across the street, she was afforded a view of Ebisu Garden Place in its entirety. In the distance stood the palatial facade of the Joel Robuchon, lit up grandly from outside. The wide open space yawning between Rika and the building made her hesitant, and she was struck by the urge to turn around, go home, and eat the butter and soy sauce rice topped with a fried egg that had become her new favorite dinner. By the time she reached the entrance on the right-hand side of the building, she was weary with cold and nerves. She had deliberated long and hard, but eventually opted to wear the chocolate-brown tweed suit that was her go-to for formal occasions. Solo female diners must be few and far between at Joel Robuchon. What would the people working here think of her? In front of the reception desk, a tall woman in a black suit with a chignon slipped off Rika's coat. Her fluid movements made the heavy, well-worn garment feel featherlight. Rika followed her up the staircase with its ornate banisters to the first floor. The glass doors opened. Rika blinked at the scene that unfolded in front of her, as dazzling to her eyes as if she'd dived into a glass of champagne. The whole space sparkled with honey-colored light. The faint sounds of glasses clinking and forks against plates became themselves flashes of light, bounding around the room. Shown to a table in one corner, Rika took her seat. Behind her, a pane of glass protected the dazzling display of Swarovski crystal that studded the walls. The waitress ran through the day's menu, but her speech was so strewn with words Rika had never heard before that none of it seemed to sink in. She looked down at the menu and ordered a glass of what looked like the cheapest champagne. This wasn't officially part of her professional research, so she couldn't put it on expenses, and she'd be paying over 30,000 yen for the dinner already. She glanced up at the chandelier laden with so many crystals that it seemed likely to fall from the ceiling at any second. Was this the real world? Was the world in which Rika usually lived the fake one? The experience was making her unsure. She took in her surroundings. As she'd anticipated, the restaurant was full of couples. With just a cursory look, she could make out 3 pairs of elderly men with young women. She could tell that they weren't fathers and daughters either. The women's hair and skin were singularly lustrous, and they were dressed in a way that suggested that doing so was their profession, while the men looked affluent. A serving of clear jelly was brought out as the amuse-bouche. It came in a heavy, elegant porcelain dish, which she felt sure would have made her swoon if she'd known the first thing about ceramics. The neatly lined-up forks and knives were immaculately polished and caught the light from the chandelier. Rika put a spoonful of the jelly to her mouth and was hit by the sour tang of lemon rind. The mouthful glided across her tongue and plummeted down her throat. There was no sweetness to it whatsoever. While the jelly slid slowly across the lining of her stomach, she felt a hunger stealthily rising up in her, from deep in her belly. This, she thought, this is a magic potion to enliven the senses. As if to prove this, she now distinctly overheard a scrap of the conversation from the next table. "I've reserved a hotel room for us for afterwards." Was the room at the Westin just a few dozen meters away, she wondered? Met by this announcement from the gray-haired man, the young woman sitting opposite him continued to chew her fish, nodding very slightly but not meeting his eyes. Rika found herself thinking of her own teenage years. Back then, talk of subsidized dating was all over the media. It was the era of the high school girl as a sexual commodity. Walking around Shibuya in uniform, the eyes of men of her father's generation had poured over her, sizing her up, before they held up a certain number of fingers to indicate the price they'd be willing to pay. It wasn't just once or twice that this had happened to Rika, but on numerous occasions. Those memories were ruptures within the peaceful stretch of her adolescence, surrounded by other girls, and just thinking back to them gave her a rush of fear. Kajii was 2 years older than Rika and must have experienced, to a greater or lesser extent, the same kind of cultural climate. Rika didn't know how high school girls from Niigata had spent their time after school, what they might have been exposed to, but according to Kajii's testimony in court, Her first romantic partner had been a married salesman in his 40s who traveled back and forth between Niigata and Tokyo for his work. She'd been 17 at the time. It was this man who had enticed Kajii away from her hometown. Yes, thinking about it, Rika realized that was something that Kajii had which she didn't: a hometown. Rika had been born in Tokyo, had lost the home she'd grown up in after her parents' divorce, and had never lived in any other city. She had neither a place to leave nor a place to go back to. She looked up to see a knob of canary yellow butter being carried towards her in a glass-lidded container. All this butter just for me, when there's a national shortage. Hearing Rika mumbling these words, the maitre d' smiled and lifted the lid of the dish. This butter has been flown in especially from overseas. Please help yourself to as much as you'd like. Confronted with an overwhelming selection of different kinds of bread on the trolley, Rika chose the simplest option she could see: a piece of baguette. Once again, she thought that she should have come with Reiko. Reiko would have told her which to choose. Rika spread a thick layer of butter on the bread. The butter, of a firmness that would break apart slowly on the tongue, went sinking into the crumb of the baguette. That alone was enough to make Rika glad she'd come. The next course to be served was a chilled dish of avocado and snow crab stacked delicately like layer cake, topped with a generous helping of caviar. The acidity of the pomegranate seeds that exploded juicily in her mouth accentuated the creamy richness of the avocado and the sweetness of the crab flesh. Their unabashed scarlet hue brought the color palette of the whole plate to life. Chased by the champagne, the taste of the crab and the caviar expanded like light suffusing her mouth. If Kajii's account of her own past was to be trusted, she had first emerged on the scene as a muse-like figure, protected and supported by a network of prosperous old men. While it seemed too loose in its setup to merit the term prostitution ring, there was no doubt that the association, which Kajii had described as an intellectual salon frequented by those with an appreciation for the real thing, was at least a little shady. What had Kajii been like at that age, as a young girl fresh out of Niigata? Rika waited until a waiter came to clear her empty plate, then ordered a glass of red wine. Her selection procedure was based entirely on the reasonableness of the price. The wine brought over had a smoky taste reminiscent of bacon, which spread out plump and round at the back of her throat. The base of her tongue grew hot and tingly. Of the numerous sensational things Kajii had come out with in court, the one that had caused the biggest ripple was her statement that, looking back on her 20s, she felt she'd lived a life like Holly Golightly in Breakfast at Tiffany's. "Were you making your living as a prostitute?" the lawyer for the prosecution had snapped back, to which Kajii had responded with great composure, "I lived as Holly did. I belonged to nobody, either spiritually or physically. I was traveling. The sports papers and magazines had written this up in articles with titles like "Fatso Serial Killer Thinks She's Hepburn," deriding her lack of self-awareness. And yet, if you took Kajii's identification with Hepburn's character at face value, things started to fall into place. Before joining Le Salon de Mayuko, Kajii had been a student at the Daikanyama branch of Le Cordon Bleu Cooking School, the Paris cooking school attended by the female lead in the film Sabrina, also played by Hepburn. There, Sabrina is taught not only cooking skills, but a sense of style, an entire way of life. When the chef tells her to lose her ponytail, she swaps her long hair for a pixie cut, transforming into a beautiful, sophisticated young woman. Her stubbornly flat soufflés begin to swell as they should. Maybe Kajii had thought of her dalliances with older men as being in the spirit of Audrey Hepburn coupling with Humphrey Bogart and Fred Astaire. According to her blog, Kajii's father, a man of refined tastes, had taken her along to the cinema showing old classics in Niigata. Had the films she said she'd seen there, My Fair Lady, Funny Face, Roman Holiday, come to shape her unique set of priorities? Rika thought now of Holly Golightly. Between Truman Capote's original novel and the film adaptation, there was a big difference both in Holly's personality and the ending to her story. With Hepburn portraying her, Golightly had come to be known as a metropolitan pixie with a lucid, ethereal quality, but the original Holly was a failed actress turned high-class hooker. Dating was her profession, and she went flitting from man to man, seeking only her own comfort. As an adolescent, Rika too had admired and envied Holly and her New York life. Had Manako Kajii simply attempted to stage a recreation of breakfast at Tiffany's set in contemporary Japan, with herself in the starring role? The grilled foie gras brought out next was accompanied by dried persimmons sautéed in butter. The saltiness of the butter drew out the persimmons' clinging, pervasive flavor. So tenaciously umami-rich was their taste, it was almost impossible to believe this was fruit that had once grown on a tree. It seemed more like a sweet, flaky meat, no less so than the foie gras, in fact, which was so exquisitely tender that it broke apart on the tongue, oozing thick blood-scented liquid. Though she hadn't planned it so, the dish made a perfect match with the smoky notes of the red wine. Rika sighed. Piece after piece, the foie gras melted away softly in her mouth. She felt a sense of melancholy at reaching the end. The truffles are excellent, no? This is the season for them, the elder gentleman sitting beside her said solicitously to his companion. As before, the young woman was chewing away in silence. There was virtually no conversation between them, and yet the look on the man's face was one of intense satisfaction. This wasn't the kind of relationship where the people in it drew pleasure from communicating, Rika thought. This was an old man dabbling in the costly pastime of cultivating a young girl so that her tastes matched his. Seeing it happening in real life, it appeared utterly unilateral, something only someone horribly self-satisfied would think of doing. The man's tone was not dissimilar to that of Rika's increasingly senile grandfather as he vented at her mother. Rika was starting to believe that women who were expected to accompany men in their pursuit of self-satisfaction had the right to make demands of their own. The image of a face now surfaced in Rika's mind. It belonged to the second of Kajii's victims, who had died after Tadanobu Motomatsu and before Tokio Yamamura, Hisanori Nimi. Back in mid-August 2013, Nimi had been found drowned in the bathtub of his Hatagaya apartment, where he lived alone. Had he and Kajii had dates like the couple sitting alongside her? Rika wondered. While Kajii had only been explicit about coming to Joel Robuchon with Tokio Yamamura, in all likelihood, she had also come with Nimi. Kajii had met Nimi online at a much earlier stage than she had the others, and they had begun seeing one another when Kajii was still in her 20s. Neither wanted to get married, and it seemed to have been a comfortable relationship. Why, then, had she needed to kill this former patron of hers? The question niggled at Rika. That phrase she'd heard Kajii use several times, a mature man, with the capacity for both emotional and financial generosity, surely referred to Nimi. The waiter brought over a plate of flounder in a white lemony sauce. The delicate yet fresh flavor palette, reminiscent of early summer, sent a welcome breeze rippling through Rika's feverish excitement. There were further differences between Nimi and the other two victims. Nimi was a divorcee and had a child with his former wife. He was of medium height and build, with a handsome, masculine face, tanned from his frequent golfing expeditions, and put some effort into maintaining his looks. He had handed over the reins of the small import company he had run for years to his son, but he remained a social creature and would sometimes take Kajii out and show her off. He had boasted to his colleagues and the staff at the bar he often frequented that he was going out with an innocent princess young enough to be his daughter. He had gourmet tastes and enjoyed touring a wealth of different restaurants with Kajii. A plate of caramelized pork served with truffles and a silky corn mash was set down on the table. The candy that was secreted inside the mash popped on Rika's tongue, and she felt her eyes opening wide. "Ah," she exclaimed, her face growing hot. As with the magical jelly she'd been given as the amuse-bouche, the dish suggested that food here was not just food, but an expertly designed form of entertainment. The ride started out gently, slowing down and speeding up before finally reaching the climax, where all the hints dropped along the way fell into place. Kajii had pulled a face when Rika had said it, but this place really was like Disneyland, Rika thought now. Her palate was still not refined enough to appreciate the truffles, though eating them felt like crunching on fragrant dry leaves strewn on the floor of an autumnal forest. With dessert, an impressionist painting composed of fig confit and mascarpone, Behind her, she felt like her stomach was about to burst, and when the trolley full of tiny cakes that looked like a stall from a summer festival pulled up to her table, she almost moaned. Once she'd reached the bottom of her strong coffee, she would have to leave this place. Thinking about her journey home and how cold it was outside, her reluctance to leave became overwhelming. Taken by the urge to slump down onto the black tablecloth, Rika closed her eyes. She'd been so nervous before arriving, yet she now felt she wanted to do it all again, right from the amuse-bouche on. Could she say with any confidence that she'd tasted it all? When would be the next time she came? In a few years' time? Or would this visit be her last? The sadness swelled in her at the very idea. Through her eyelids, the lights of the chandelier swayed provocatively. Your digestive system's just upset after all that heavy food. It's nothing to worry about. I made you some soup that's great for indigestion. Fingers crossed you'll like it. Saying this, Reiko took out a thermos flask from her tote bag and poured a cupful of the cloudy white liquid into its lid. Rika made out the tingle of ginger on her taste buds, and her throat immediately grew hot. The soup of scallions, daikon, and goji berries slipped down smoothly into her stomach. With almost no salt and only the sweetness of its ingredients, its taste was subtle, yet full and rounded nonetheless, and impossible to imagine tiring of. Her stomach made a noise like a small creature mewling, and the two women locked eyes and laughed. They had arranged to meet for lunch somewhere near Rika's office on the day of Reiko's next appointment at the Suedobashi maternity clinic, but with the previous night's Robuchon feast still lying undigested in her stomach, Rika couldn't face the idea of eating anything else. Her whole body was heavy, as though swollen with salt and fat. She felt devoid of inspiration, as if her brain had been caramelized in honey. She was so sluggish that she didn't feel like doing a thing. She'd told Reiko as much in a message that morning, and hours later Reiko had showed up at the office reception desk with a wicker basket containing a flask of her special soup. Now, in the crowded staff canteen, Reiko carefully studied the samples in the glass case before selecting the most popular Taishika lunch. This is amazing! Trust the Shimaisha canteen to have such great food. I'd be happy paying for this sweet and sour black pork in an upmarket hotel. I can't believe you can eat this for 400 yen. They say that the publishing industry is struggling, but the big places must still be doing all right. Reiko was smiling as she spoke, her lips glistening with sweet and sour sauce. In her white mohair sweater, she looked a bit like a rabbit. Looking intently at her friend, as she would someone she didn't know well, a peculiar feeling came over Rika. It was funny to be sitting across from Reiko in the staff canteen like this. Until a year and a half ago, Reiko had been an accomplished PR person, forever dashing from one place to another, yet now here she was, coming into Rika's workplace like she were on a field trip, savoring the whole experience. She wondered at how far her friend's sense of herself had shifted in the interim. How amazing that you went to dinner at Robuchon, though. He's a real Japanophile and an expert on Japanese ingredients. Persimmon and foie gras sounds like such a rich and delicious combination. Honestly, the tableware and the interior design alone put me in a daze. It was so much extravagance crammed together in one place I could barely take it all in. It's possible I didn't even properly taste the food? Maybe I'm just getting old. The biggest surprise was that the meat course contained this kind of popping candy, like the stuff I ate at primary school. Right, when it comes to ingredients, anything goes with Robuchon. But popping candy? Wow. I never got to eat that at school. My mom's parenting might have been slapdash, but she was very strict about buying sweets and things. Reiko's expression looked aggrieved. When it came to gastronomic experiences, her covetousness rivaled that of Kajii. It made me think how much sheer physical strength Kajii must have, you know? To be able to eat a feast like that, go back to the West End to have sex, and go restaurant hopping again the very next day, before writing it all up on her blog. Sensing that something wasn't quite right, Rika looked up. The expression on her friend's face, a kind of discomfort, was not one she'd ever seen before. Thinking she must have put her foot in it somehow, Rika traced back over what she'd just said, and then it dawned on her. She'd almost never spoken with Reiko about anything sexual. Reiko was fastidiously prim. She didn't let men get away with telling even remotely dirty jokes around her. Even the pair's reports to one another about their first times had been vague. We should go together one time. I've only ever been to the more casual branch in Roppongi, where you sit at the counter. Taking charge of the conversation, Reiko lifted the corners of her mouth into a bright smile. Rika brought the topic back round to Kajii regardless. I think she might have gone to Robuchon quite a lot with her second victim, Nimi. It's amazing that her suitors could keep up with that kind of diet and lifestyle when they were hardly spring chickens. That really struck me while I was there. Although saying that, there were plenty of those couples in the restaurant. Is Nimi the oldish one who is a bit of a player? Already a foodie before he met her? All this info of mine comes straight out of the weekly magazines, I should say. He may well have been, but there was also an element of him wanting to impress Kajii, to put on a show for her. I, for one, couldn't keep up with her lifestyle. It seems Nimi had high blood pressure, which makes me wonder if the whole bathtub thing might just have been an accident. Surely anyone, eating so lavishly. As she spoke, Rika registered that Reiko's eyes weren't smiling in the slightest. The fat from the undigested foie gras instantly cooled inside her body, so she could feel its shape distinctly. Aren't you coming dangerously close to siding with her? Are you telling me all 3 men died of natural causes, their demise brought on because they couldn't keep up with her lifestyle? You think she's innocent, is that what you're saying? Rika felt the clamor of the canteen slip away like a wave receding. Reiko's words formed sharp angles, cutting into her flesh, seeking out her vital organs. Hearing Reiko put it into such plain words, Rika thought it didn't sound so ridiculous. If she was honest, it was a possibility she had found herself considering. Tadanobu Motomatsu and his overdose of sleeping pills, Hisanori Nimi found drowned in the bath, and Tokyo Yamamura run over by a train. There was no material evidence that Kajii had killed any of them. The only thing to incriminate her was the fact that she'd been with them until soon before their deaths. Reiko was frowning at her reproachfully. With trepidation, Rika spoke. You're a Kajimana fan too, though, no? Do you remember when I came to your house last year and we talked about the story of little Babaji? I remember you saying that it was the tiger's fault, that they brought about their own death by turning into butter. I just mean, you're trying to say that Kajii's men are like the tigers? Reiko cut in sharply. She seemed oblivious to the sauce of her sweet and sour pork gradually congealing on her plate. You want to imply that Manako Kajii simply brought home the butter that she stumbled across and used it to enjoy a good meal, and that there's nothing wrong with that? She has no awareness of lying, therefore she isn't a liar? She has no awareness of having killed, therefore she's not a killer? Is that what you think? Her appetite and her sex drive run to such extraordinary degrees that they took a toll on the lives of the people and eventually threw their lives off course? If that's how you really see it, then I think you're already under her spell. Rika tried to smile, but it didn't feel as though she was doing it right. Reiko was attacking her. Over the course of their 14-year friendship, they'd argued several times, but she'd never before experienced the stony expression that Reiko's face wore now, or this sensation of having no idea what to say in response. I think you want to be like her in some way. Want to be like her? What do you mean? Why would I want to be like a convicted serial killer? Why is my voice trembling like this? Rika wondered as she spoke. Reiko couldn't know anything. It was a terrible misunderstanding. But the large, pale brown eyes hovering before her permitted no escape route. If eating exactly what she wants and having men following in her footsteps results in their deaths, then that's a perfect crime of truly delicious proportions. Pursing her lips tightly, she gazed fixedly at Rika. Finally, she said, "You seem tired recently, Rika. You don't seem to have any motivation to exercise either." There was an unfamiliar cruelty to the gaze with which Reiko now surveyed her body. Was even Reiko hinting for her to lose weight now? As it happened, Rika had gained another kilo. Her expression must have been pretty dejected because Reiko let up. But look, never mind that. I'm sorry, let's change the subject. Did you know that Joel Robuchon is a Freemason? Apparently he talks about it in his autobiography. From then until the moment she had to leave to make her appointment, Reiko kept up a stream of conversation so cheerful as to seem contrived. Rika walked her to the door of the building to say goodbye, and Reiko went pattering off in the direction of Kagurazaka, her wicker basket dangling from one arm. When Rika returned to the editing room, you approached her with a clipboard in hand. That girl you were with before, was she a prospective employee? Visiting from one of the universities or something? On the verge of bursting out laughing, Rika took the clipboard. No, she's a friend. The same age as me. We were in the same year at university, and now she's married. Until last year, she worked for a big film company. She's much older than you are. Seriously? Sorry, in that case. She doesn't look it at all, though. Carrying that straw basket, I thought she had to be a student. You widened her eyes dramatically. I'm sure she'd be delighted to hear that. She's always looked young for her age, though. I mean, she definitely looks young, but it's not just that. You seem to be struggling to articulate her thoughts. Her irises swam, and Rika felt sure that she was seeing a Reiko who wasn't actually in front of her. And the real Reiko, what was she doing right now? Was she at this very moment spreading her reedy legs for the famous fertility doctor, whose praises she sang so highly? Rika quickly pushed the image from her mind, feeling a surge of self-hatred. I think it's her aura. It's like she's not resigned herself in any way. She's so intense. She was looking at you with such sparkle in her eyes, it seemed less how you'd look at a friend and more the way you look at someone older, whom you look up to and aspire to be. Oh, no way. Reiko's got her life far better sorted than I have, and she's got a lovely husband. Saying this, Rika switched on her computer. Lots of people in her department came into the office past noon, so the office was at its busiest after lunch. But you seemed like she wanted to continue talking. Everyone starts to become resigned to things sooner or later, don't they? As adults. Hey, what's with all this glumness? You've passed our internal exam, you're on easy street now. Oh, I get it. You've got the post-finding employment blues. I remember that, actually. Do you really? It's like I can see my future as this straight line stretching out front of me. I know it's a luxury complaint to have. Anyway, I'm going to see my favorite idol group play live tonight, which should perk me up. I'll be full of beans again by tomorrow, I promise. An idol group? One of the boy bands. They're called Scream. They're all middle school girls. Have you heard of them? They've not had much media coverage yet, but before long they'll be on the Kahaku New Year's Song Contest and become nationwide stars, and then all the magazines for middle-aged men like ours will be covering them. They're so talented. Yu's way of speaking was usually clipped, and it was rare to find this degree of excitement in her tone. When Rika looked up at her in surprise, Yu flushed, waving her hand in front of her face as if to bat away any misunderstandings. Don't get me wrong, I'm not an otaku or anything like that. They have quite a few fans here in the company. Mr. Fujimura from the books department loves them. Apparently one of his authors is into them and dragged him along to a concert, but then he grew to like them himself. Really? Mr. Fujimura too, eh? That's unexpected. Rika could sense she was pulling an odd expression. The subject had never once come up between her and Makoto. As soon as you had turned her back, Rika pulled out her smartphone and sent him a text. She heard him reply instantly. All at once, her feeling of indigestion had eased. Makoto had suggested meeting at a Japanese bistro currently in vogue on the main Kagurazaka shopping street. As soon as Rika descended to the basement where the restaurant was located, she understood that the cuisine here was not what Kajii would have called orthodox. Both the jazz playing in the background and the voices of the staff were too loud. She was escorted to a private room that was softly lit with indirect lighting, yet something about the space left her unable to relax. Makoto, sitting opposite her, now spread his napkin and said, as if reassured, I get it, finally. It's all because you're reporting on Manako Kajii. It stands to reason that you'd be eating a lot if that's the case. Getting an exclusive interview with her would be a real coup. Rika had arranged to meet Makoto in a restaurant not solely to talk about the idol group issue. She also wanted to tell him that she'd been meeting with Kajii. She was trying to persuade herself that it was okay to trust Makoto, and in order to do so, she wanted to share something important with him. That comes as a real relief. I'm sorry for saying all that stuff. If that's the reason you're putting on weight, then it doesn't bother me at all. I was out of line and I apologize. It was insensitive of me. Why was it, Rika wondered to herself, that this apology didn't take away her doubts? Judging from Makoto's interactions with the serving staff, he had come here before. The restaurant's concept was healthy meals that used plenty of organic vegetables. In this, too, she sensed a powerful pressure to lose weight, which made her insides contract. Yet, she was finding she didn't have the energy to get down about each and everything. Yes, that was it. She just didn't have the energy. She was tired of living her life thinking constantly about how she appeared to others, checking her answers against everyone else's. The organic noble rot wine slipped down her throat like water. The food here is low on calories, so you can eat as much as you like, Makoto said, smiling kindly, but Rika soon found herself irritated by the taste of the dishes that showed up one after another on their table. Tofu capris, root vegetable ratatouille. The meals were neither Japanese nor Western, neither rich nor simple. She was bored by this kind of cuisine, with its taste that didn't seem to be making any kind of statement. As she failed to make headway with her portion of brown rice paella with basket clams, Makoto looked curiously at her. "We don't come on dates like this often, so why not forget about your diet for tonight and just enjoy yourself?" Why didn't he realize how contradictory his demands were? The worst of it was that he thought of himself as one of the good ones, an enlightened man who understood women. Until not long ago, Rika had thought the same of him. She would usually have felt grateful for his consideration in this situation. "You say that, but if I eat, I'll definitely put on weight. Rice is still a carbohydrate, even if it's brown. Are you still worrying about what I said? I've told you, that was my mistake. I don't think you have to be thin or anything. All I was saying is that it's not good to let yourself go. You've been forcing yourself to eat for professional reasons, no? That's not your fault. If you're gaining weight as a result of the effort you're making for your work, then it's unavoidable. Just look at how I've ended up, thanks to all the socializing I have to do for work." Rika felt like she was being roped into an alliance against her will, and she wanted no part of it. She felt no inclination to carry on the conversation. "Oh yeah, I wanted to ask. Is it true that you're into that idol group Scream?" Before leaving the office, Rika had looked them up online. 5 middle school girls who had just made their debut, managed by a small talent agency. The group's selling point seemed to be that its members looked like any other girls their age, but on stage they transformed into dazzling performers. Makoto nodded, as though it were no big deal. "Oh, did you let the cat out of the bag?" "Yeah, I do like them. If you're interested, why don't you come along to their next concert with the bunch from work? You'll enjoy it, I think. They've got quite a few female fans. But all teenagers, no? I think I'll pass. I'm not sure I can get into music made by girls young enough to be my children." "Oh, they're totally different from all your run-of-the-mill idol groups. There's a strong emphasis on talent, and the girls really give it their all. Every time I see them, they've improved. They always show so much gratitude to their fans, and they're very modest. Watching them gives you the feeling that you want to try your hardest, too." Makoto took out his smartphone and showed her a photo of him in a Scream t-shirt. Seeing him looking the very picture of an otaku made her smile. Indeed, there was nothing about his objective, reasoned way of speaking to cause discomfort. Still, the more she heard Makoto praise the Scream members' determination and modesty, the greater the feeling grew inside Rika that she couldn't get on board. You had to have a reason for liking something. That was what she heard him saying. He liked these girls because they made an effort, and anyone who didn't wasn't worthy of his praise. It struck her that she'd have found it much easier to accept if he'd come out and said he liked them because they were cute. "Don't you have any idols?" At this unexpected question, Rika abandoned her struggle to remove the basket clam glued tightly to its shell and looked up at him. In the glow of the soft lighting, Makoto's friendly round eyes made him look ever so kind. There are lots of women out there who'd want to date him, she thought to herself, as though the fact were quite unconnected to her. "I guess you don't really go for that kind of stuff, do you?" Makoto continued. "It doesn't have to be a celebrity. I was just wondering if you've ever had someone you aspired to be like, who made you feel brave or inspired or whatever. When you were in your teens, for example. Someone you aspired to be like." With this phrase, Her conversation with Reiko came flooding back to her, and she felt the firm, salty tofu masquerading as mozzarella break apart underneath her tongue. An unpleasant, fishy taste spread through her mouth. Life is hard without someone to admire or yearn for, though, don't you think? They paid the bill and were climbing the flight of steps leading up to the street when Makoto said to her from behind, "Hey, can I stay over tonight?" It was the first time he'd asked in a while, and Rika felt her heart start to race anxiously. She wasn't yet fully recovered from her bout of indigestion, and despite the healthy dinner, her body still felt sluggish and heavy. Even lifting her feet to climb the stairs was a trial. "Not tonight, I think, sorry. I've got a very early start tomorrow." Turning around, she saw Makoto nod, before reaching out his hand to gently intertwine his fingers with hers. He was so understanding that her previous moment of panic seemed like wasted energy. "He's stingy." With both his wallet and his spirit, Manako Kajii pronounced matter-of-factly. She was in such a good mood today that it was hard to believe this was the same woman who'd gone at Rika with such ferocity on her previous visit. Kajii had responded favorably to her request for another meeting because Rika had been to Robuchon as instructed and written up her impressions in a letter. When she now confided to Kajii about her bistro date and how the food hadn't been to her taste, Kajii found fault not only with the cuisine, but with Rika's suitor as well. "Have you ever dated a man of influence with generosity of spirit?" "No. I can count on one hand the number of men I've ever dated, and all of them have been my age." At some stage, Rika's reservations about revealing elements of her private life to Kajii had vanished. In her letter, she had confided to Kajii that her parents had divorced when she was in middle school, that her mother had started up a small boutique with a friend, that her father had died, that she'd gone to an all-girls school, that she'd met her best friend at a mixed university, and that she was dating someone her age at the company. Yet Kajii grew bored by the topic of Makoto almost immediately. "Well, in any case, let us talk about Robuchon. That champagne gold interior with the black tablecloths to draw out its brilliance is simply glorious, isn't it? I adore it there. Did you go there with Mr. Nimi?" Did I wonder? I can't remember. I went there with so many people, I don't recall all the individual occasions. In all honesty, I think it was too glamorous for me. It made my eyes spin. Rika was starting to learn that it was her most unaffected reactions that lodged the deepest with Kajii. True to form, Kajii's expression now softened. If only she looked like this all the time, Rika thought. She felt closer to understanding the lengths her male suitors had gone to keep her in a good mood. "There's something rather boyish about you, Rika. Like a middle school boy." It was the second time ever that Manako had said Rika's name. Hearing it from her lips gave her a ticklish, embarrassed feeling. Kajii giggled, mockingly. "Do you not think you need to learn to love yourself more? That way you'll come to realize that it's a waste to diminish yourself by going on dates with people you aren't matched with. Your estimation of yourself is too low." "I wonder whether I can do that, though. If I give this guy up, I don't have any confidence I'll find someone else. He's a good person, generally speaking. I feel that all women would like to learn to love themselves the way you do, to act with confidence, but it's actually the hardest thing of all." "Rubbish. It's easy. Ignore all that nonsense about making an effort and so forth. All you need to do is to eat as much of whatever it is you most desire at any given moment. Listen carefully to your heart and your body. Never eat anything you don't want to. When you take the decision to live that way, both your mind and your body will commence their transformation." The seaweed salad she shoveled down her throat at her desk, the gritty dried fruit she snacked on while on the move, the Japanese bistro Makoto had taken her to of late. Rika was so scared of putting on any more weight that she was subsisting entirely on things she didn't want to eat. But no, that was misrepresenting the situation. In her 33 years, had she ever spontaneously eaten anything that she wanted to? The meals she'd eaten since becoming acquainted with Kajii had been delicious, but even though she'd ingested purely because she'd been instructed to by someone else. Kajii had rolled up the sleeves of her jumper to reveal her fleshy arms, which she began stroking and caressing with her fingers. Conscious of Rika's admiring gaze on her skin, She spoke in a nasal, cooing voice. My arms, my breasts, and my bottom are packed to bursting with all my favorite food. My body is made up entirely from steaks from the New York Grill, sukiyaki from Imahan, and the gargantuan Shalyapan steak pie from the Imperial Hotel. When I grow fatigued by the food they serve here in prison, and I feel like I'm going out of my mind imagining all the delectable things I could be eating, I gently touch and squeeze myself. My upper arms are particularly cool and soft. When I stick out my tongue and lick them, I can taste their sweetness. Kajii winked mischievously at Rika, who couldn't take her eyes off her. Stroking her upper arm, groping its flesh through the fabric of her jumper, she rolled her eyes back in her head suggestively. A picture floated into Rika's mind of Kajii stark naked, her huge breasts pressed together and her chin thrust forwards to fit her nipples into her mouth. This woman wanted to eat herself whole. Maybe she masturbated this way when the prison officers weren't looking, Rika thought now. The object of Kajii's desire wasn't past lovers or celebrities she had crushes on, but her own body. Was that why, even stripped of her freedom and faced with the possibility of having to live out the rest of her life here, she seemed so satisfied, exuding such potent femininity? She was like a self-pollinating plant in full bloom. For all she scorned other women for eschewing men, wasn't it Kajii, above anyone, who least needed a male partner? Since I was young, I've always been delectable to insects. When the weather's balmy, they come flocking to me. Mr. Motomatsu used to say that even my breath must be sweet. Saying this, she exhaled an affected puff of air. The acrylic screen between them grew foggy. Your office is situated in Kagurazaka, isn't it? That's an excellent location. Do you like teppanyaki? The aged sirloin steak from Miyazaki is wonderful, naturally, but it's the garlic butter rice that they bring out at the end that is truly exquisite. Give it a try. Then let me know what you think. At the moment, your culinary tales are the only thing I have to look forward to. Saying this, she shot Rika an unstudied smile, and for a second, Rika felt unbearably sad for her. She wanted to smash the acrylic screen and lead Kajii away from here. She wanted to watch Manako Kajii devouring a plate of food, to feel the thrill of it right to the marrow of her bones. Why had she put on lipstick? Instead of taking off her makeup when she left the office, instead of removing any trace of softness, Rika had gone into the bathroom and reapplied her lipstick. She almost came to a standstill midway up the hill. At first, she'd thought about inviting Reiko to the restaurant and offering to pay, but she felt that right now even so much as mentioning Manako Kajii's name was liable to put Reiko in a bad mood, so she decided to leave it. She and Shinoi had formed a habit of meeting in the same cheap izakaya, but it couldn't hurt to go somewhere nice for once, and besides, there was something she wanted to talk to him about. So she told him there was a restaurant she wanted to visit, and they'd decided on today to meet. As she headed along the route that would take her there, the narrow, labyrinthine backstreets of Kagurazaka twisted and turned off at a multiplicity of angles, tempting her in different directions. She passed a white couple with a touristy air about them. In front of a small torii gate, she was noticing for the first time, bunches of flowers had been left in offering. The smell of dashi emanated from a restaurant. Looking up at the night sky, it was hard to believe that all of this lay behind the scenery she encountered day in, day out. She'd passed along here multiple times for work drinks, yet tonight, strangely enough, everything seemed vivid in a way it never had before. Sorry for keeping you. It was hard to get away from the office today. When she arrived at the restaurant 5 minutes late, Rika found Shinoi sitting at one side of a full counter, facing the long teppan, hot plate, and drinking a beer. Exposed to the sizzle and the smell of frying meat, her tongue moistened. The fact that she was craving meat when the memory of her recent bout of indigestion was still so vivid was a sign that she was getting more gluttonous. Feeling the slick of her lipstick heavy on her lips, she glanced towards the door of the bathroom, designated by a Norin curtain. I've put on weight recently. Rika had decided to announce it herself, before he could point it out. Have you? Shinoi cocked his head and looked at her with his distinctive round eyes. Their whites were cloudy, and beneath them lay the usual heavy dark bags. It had been a long time since she'd been inspected by a member of the opposite sex in such a blatant way, even if she'd been the one to prompt it, and she felt her midriff grow hot and the blood course thickly through her. Shinoi averted his gaze to the gleaming hot plate and said, somewhat bluntly, "Sorry, I'm not good at noticing things like that. I'm kind of clueless when it comes to changes in women's appearance. But I think you're fine as you are now." The appetizers were brought over. As the water shield served in its little glass bowl went slipping down her throat, she felt a fresh spring well up in her stomach. Polishing off her first beer, Rika thought back to the events of the previous night. She'd been out to a members' bar in Akasaka with a budget examiner from the Ministry of Finance. After making her sing 2 duets with him on the karaoke machine, he'd reached out a swollen hand, wedding band glinting on its finger, towards her thigh. Similar things had happened to her in the past, she was sure, but it was the first time that the other person in the equation had displayed their desire so brazenly. Maybe there was something different about her after all. If she were being totally honest, she didn't utterly dislike her new physique. When she was in the bath and her eyes fell on her naked thighs and her stomach, glistening and gleaming as if lit from the inside, speckled with beads of water, she found herself staring at her own body if she were looking at a slab of ekire butter. Maybe, if she weren't receiving so much criticism from the people around her, she would be fine with the way she looked. The budget examiner's fawning attitude as he tried to cozy up to her flipped the moment that Rika brushed his hand away. "Think you can still put on airs now that you're fat like a pig?" he spat out, affecting drunkenness with his tone. The contradiction at the heart of his actions seemed ridiculous and pathetic, to the point that she'd had to stifle a smile. He was like the men who'd given money to Manako Kajii, she thought. She had only just about managed to stop him from touching her, but she was curiously free of fear or shame. She had no doubt that if something similar had happened previously, she'd have been plunged into violent self-loathing for days, for having given him the opportunity to act as he did. Rika had held his icy, mocking gaze, and this morning she'd received a fearful-sounding text from him. "I drank too much last night, so I don't remember what I said, but if I was rude then I apologize." It was the first time that Rika had ever experienced someone groveling like that, when she herself had no sense of having lost anything. Maybe this way she'd be able to get some information out of him about the upcoming budget. Now, she decided to stop fretting about her lipstick. It would rub off while she was eating the meat anyway. Just as the two of them finished their plump white asparagus spears in white sauce, they were served a selection of grilled vegetables. To think that onions could become so sweet and rich simply by grilling them. Rika had never been a fan of shishito peppers, but the ones on the plate in front of her were fragrant, with a gentle taste. Before she knew it, she devoured many more vegetables than she had the other night in that Japanese bistro, just a few dozen meters from here. She was fairly sure that the red meat being cooked on a section of the hot plate not far from where they were sitting was for them. Eventually, clear juice began oozing from its surface. Even the smell of the melting fat was appealing and mild, not aggressive or meaty. She watched transfixed as the red turned to pale pink as the white fat grew translucent. The meat was cut up and served to them in pieces. Rika imagined it would be steaming hot, but when she brought one of the chunks to her lips, she found it to be just the right temperature. The comfort it brought was that of a warm, affectionate tongue entering her mouth. When she bit into the aromatic seared surface of the meat, the juice from the moist, rare sections came seeping out, making the lining of her cheeks tremble. A blood-colored filament flickered across her vision. Apparently, the garlic butter rice here is truly out of this world. They use plenty of butter as well as the leftover meat juices. Rika was looking at the rice cooking on the hot plate as she spoke. Cloaked in their mantle of amber butter, the grains shimmied and danced before her eyes. There was a sizzle as the chef poured on some soy sauce, and then the short, spirited tango was over. Bowls of the glistening bronze rice appeared before them. Swathed in meat juice and butter, each and every grain shone potently. The rich, heady aroma of the soy sauce stoked Rika's appetite. The garlic singed to a deep brown unleashed a perilous bitterness and astringency across her palate. Slippery with fat, the rice slid across the plane of her tongue and down her throat. The meat she'd eaten before had been fantastically flavorsome, but this rice that had absorbed its juices was truly formidable in its taste. With each movement of her jaw, she felt a new lease of power surging up her body. The sense of fullness brought on a comfortable lethargy, and Rika felt she could happily drop off right at that moment. "Ah, this is so good," she mumbled several times. Glancing towards her companion, she saw that Shinoi's chopsticks had stopped moving, and he was looking at her. "Do you not like it?" No, it's not that. I was just thinking how contented you looked." He sighed, and Rika smelled the butter and garlic on his breath. Seeing his skin and lips, usually so cracked and dry, now gleaming with fat, brought Rika a sense of pride. Shinoi held out his bowl towards her. "If you like it that much, you can have the rest of mine." As embarrassed as she felt about the situation, Rika's hunger won out, and she ended up polishing off the rest of Shinoi's bowl. Then, whether because her tongue had grown loose with all the fat she'd ingested or because she'd already confessed the same thing to Makoto, she looked around and said quite smoothly, her voice lowered, "I'm thinking I'd like to do an interview with Manako Kajii for the magazine. I've been visiting Tokyo Detention House since last year, and I've spoken with her at least 4 times now. I've managed to get close while avoiding the subject of her case, but moving beyond that point feels hard. How would you approach it in my situation? If you've got this far, you must be pretty determined, so I'll tell you what I think." Shinoi rested his chopsticks on the counter. The sound of frying meat grew louder. "Offer your heart to her on a plate." As she turned to look at him, his profile looked neither particularly austere nor especially serious. It was the same Shinoi as ever, with his sunken cheeks and puffy lower eyelids, but she could tell that his mind was somewhere else. Who was the person he had once handed his heart to on a plate? You need to instill in her a sense of unbreakable trust in you. It's not about sucking up or telling lies. You show the other party your most vulnerable part. Give them a piece of your life. Dessert was caramelized apple with ice cream. As usual, they split the bill. Stepping out of the restaurant, they walked side by side along the narrow street. They were enveloped in a rich darkness, and the commotion of the main street seemed a long way off. "That was a really good find. I'm surprised. I didn't know you were into the restaurant scene." "I haven't been at all until recently. But a friend of mine who really knows her food told me about it." A friend. That was how Rika had just referred to Manako Kajii. All her adult life, Reiko had been the only person she'd used that word about. Reiko had occupied that throne so squarely that nobody else had even approached it. Rika was fairly sure that Manako Kajii had never once had a female friend she felt she could trust. "I feel like I've eaten a proper meal for the first time in ages. Thanks. If you find another place like that, take me along." "Next time it's on me," Shinoi said. When Rika turned to him in astonishment, he laughed sheepishly. "What?" he said, then quickly looked away. "Okay, I will," she said. As she stepped forward, walking alongside him, she felt the hardness of his body against hers. Her breast was touching his upper arm. Her body had swelled out so rapidly that she was still not used to its new dimensions and hadn't readjusted her movements yet to keep the right distance between herself and others. When she'd had her bra size measured at an underwear shop in the station between work appointments, she found she'd shot up from AB to a D cup. Her body was the type where excess weight went immediately to her breasts. When the older female shop assistant had grabbed her breasts roughly and pushed them inside the cup, she'd felt her nipples throb from the inside. The 3 new bras that she'd bought, grabbing hastily from the shelves while darting glances at her watch, didn't match the pants she owned, in either color or material. They weren't the kind of underwear she could show to anyone. Rika caught herself and thought about it. Who exactly would she be showing her underwear to anyway? The man next to her was a member of the editorial team at a major news firm and a reliable source of hers. That was all. She hadn't brushed up against him on purpose, and she felt that if she pulled back hurriedly she'd be confirming it as a regrettable fact, so instead she continued walking as she was, her breast softly crushed against his firm bicep. "Where do you live?" she asked him. "Suidobashi." "This might be a silly question, but what's your favorite food?" Maybe Castella cake." I recently discovered how good the packaged slices they sell in 7-Eleven are. That's a cute answer, she replied, and she saw him smiling, his white teeth glinting in the darkness. Pleasantly full as she was, Rika felt like crying. She might dine with someone, but at the end of the meal they would go their separate ways. She couldn't stay with that person forever. Even with her stomach full of warmth and the taste of delicious food lingering on her tongue, she remained alone. It didn't matter who she had for company. She was beginning to understand that the more delicious the time she spent with others, the more alone she felt. That morning, as she filled in the admission form on the ground floor of the Tokyo detention house, Rika had been hit by the sense that something wasn't right, as though she'd been drenched by an invisible downpour. "Did someone come to see you yesterday?" she asked the moment she was shown into the visiting room. Manako Kajii flashed her a smile in response. It wouldn't be unheard of for a member of her family to have visited, and Kajii had plenty of supporters. Yet Rika couldn't shake the feeling that the visitor had been someone of a similar position to her. The thought made her unbearably anxious. Was Kajii leading other journalists on at the same time? There was no room for hesitation. Today, Rika decided she would broach the matter of the interview. "You know I can only have one visit per day. Why are you so uptight?" "It's very odd." Rika was overcome by a desire to subjugate the woman sitting before her, separated only by the acrylic screen. The urge to touch her, to dig her fingers into that huge bosom, came with startling force. Kajii's body was so unlike that of the women she knew. Her mother exercised regularly and was complimented by people on her figure, her youthfulness. Reiko's firm body was like that of a young girl's. Its lack of any excess seemed designed to resist the gaze of the opposite sex. Her classmates back in school who had brushed up against her had been the same. Endlessly full and seemingly capable of absorbing anything that it touched, this body in front of her now operated according to a different aesthetic. Rika longed to feel it, to explore with her own hands that uncharted territory into which all those men had poured so much of their money. "I have a request. I want you to let me interview you. I want to make it a special feature in the Shumi Weekly, a major serialist article. If we do it, I think it'll help you with your next trial. I'm not yet in a position where I'm allowed to write my own copy, so the editorial desk would use the draft I gave them to write up the article, but I'd be responsible for making sure that there's nothing in there that could be detrimental to you." Kajii drew in her chin as if dismayed and looked fixedly at Rika. "I believe I was clear the first time you visited. I have no intention of speaking about the case. Have you still not given up on that idea? The only thing I have a mind to talk with you about is food." "Of course. I'm not looking for any information about the case or the victims. All I want to do is ensure the public has the right impression of you. I think we should try to bring public opinion over to your side. To that end, I'd like you to tell me honestly about the kind of life you've lived, about your feelings and your experiences, without hiding anything. And just what good would that do me? I've had quite enough exposure to the public's greedy curiosity already. I think that hearing about your approach to life could offer something like salvation to so many women out there who are struggling. You say that women should acknowledge their inferiority to men and let them take the lead, but the very fact that someone like you is here, breathing, is continuing to inflict damage on a lot of men. You're a paradoxical figure. The people whose noses you really put out of joint in court were all men in a position of social authority. There are many men who, even if you didn't actually lay a finger on them, had their lives thrown off course simply by having met you. You don't deny that, I presume? Japanese women are required to be self-denying, hardworking, and ascetic, and in the same breath, to be feminine, soft, and caring towards men. Everyone finds that an impossible balance to strike, and they struggle desperately as a result. Even when they do manage to strike it, there's no redemption to be had. They're never fully free. That's what women are feeling. I don't care about other women. I've no desire to try to save them. You know how much I despise most women." The cold, hard surface of Kajii's tone allowed no room for Rika to burrow her way in. She held on desperately, as if clinging with her nails onto a shiny rock face. "Maybe it's not about other women. Maybe it's me who's looking for salvation. Can you think of it as something you're doing for me?" "But why?" Kajii looked up at Rika, unconvinced. This, it seemed, was still not good enough for her. As Shinoi had said, Rika had to give herself up completely, to become a tiger and go whirling round and round until she melted into golden butter that Kajii could slather over her lips. I think it's maybe because you're… No, forget that. I want to do it because… From the day Rika had met Manako Kajii, she'd thought about her constantly. Kajii took up a greater place in her mind than Makoto, than Reiko, than her mother. Her words and behavior so riddled with contradiction, her stubborn fidelity to her own desire, her unshakable confidence, which came from averting her gaze from that which she did not want to see, all of it affected Rika deeply. She couldn't look away from her. All that reasoning Makoto needed to defend his support of the idol group wasn't necessary for Rika. Even if idolizing Kajii seemed to go against the greater part of her life as she knew it, she couldn't give up. I want to do it because… I really like you. However you analyzed Kajii's expression, you would find no trace of her being moved by these words. Rika felt the hurt take form within her instantaneously, a sharp object boring into her abdomen. It was the first time she'd told anybody of her feelings for them, the first time she'd summoned up her bravery like this, and her confession had been taken as utterly pedestrian. Can we be friends? I don't want friends. As she shook her head of glossy hair, a smile floated across Kajii's face. I don't need friends. I'm only interested in having worshippers.